What is up, everybody? Happy Sunday. I think my microphone. Let's see. I think should be good to go. Okay. Welcome to episode 36 of the Lorecaster podcast. I am Warrior F13, as you probably already know. I did remember to hit record this time, so when it goes up on YouTube, it won't be some random. Oh, hey, look, I'm on screen. So we're gonna record me reading the next two short stories, just like episode 35. There were two more short stories released after that, and go through, and I'm gonna read them. This is a goblin story and a dwarf story, and what I'm not gonna do, I'm not gonna try to read it in a terrible goblin accent or a terrible dwarf accent. Um, while I could probably do that, and it might further my potential voice acting career, I'm just not gonna. The reading won't go well, and I'll probably lose my voice faster than I want to. Like last time, I almost lost my voice in between the two stories. So we're gonna try to get through these without me losing my voice. Hopefully, all is well. So we're gonna read them in order of release. The first one is The Goblin Way by Andrew Robinson. There's a credit page just like the other ones. I'm not gonna put this up on screen. Basically, I'm trying to think of anybody on here. John Copeland is one of the lore consultation people. Creative consultation. Steve Denuser's still involved with this one. Chris Metzen's involved with this one, and a few other people. Probably people that if I paid more attention, I would know their names, but I don't more because we don't do this very often, fortunately. Still trying to figure out how we're going to get this Lorecaster podcast back up and running. Till then, this is the content we've got. So, that is that. So, that's the one. Okay. Here we go. Page 3. Monty Gaslow sighed, looking out over a vast mining operation from his spot on a platform above the mine's South District floor. This was his fifth fact-finding tour of the week. It seemed like he'd been going non-stop for months, taking stock of less than desirable working conditions among the goblins. This one was easily among the worst, though Marin Noggenfogger, Gaslow's host and guide, acted like everything was above board. Noggenfogger waved for Gaslow's attention, looking out of place in a miraculously unsullied all-white suit that practically gleamed amid the smoky air and rancid, dripping space. It was clear he'd recently taken over this operation. "Over here," he called. Then he turned to one of his bodyguards for help. "Is the two-shift working the, long wall shearer?" Gaslow offered. Noggenfogger grinned. "Yeah, what you said. The Rock Chomper 3000. Beautiful piece of machinery, eh?" He beamed more broadly as he gestured down into the enormous mine at steam-powered behemoth. Its fearsome metal teeth ground relentlessly into the bedrock to get at the vein of iron ore that was the lifeblood of this operation. "You gotta lean over the railing a little to really get a good look, unless you want to go down and see it up close," Noggenfogger added, beckoning Gaslow to the platform. Gaslow stepped closer to the railing, waving off his bodyguard, Vakan. Unlike some goblins, including Noggenfogger, it seemed, Gaslow had no fear of heights. As the shearer brought ground ore to the surface, Gaslow leaned against the railing to watch workers, mostly goblins and some orcs, operate walking mechs with steam shovels, which loaded ore into mining carts, which would take it to the processing plant. A number of workers had bandages wrapped around their limbs, likely because of discarded machine parts cluttering the footpaths, and a few let out fits of wet, throaty coughs while clamping soiled rags over their mouths. Noggenfogger gave Gaslow a fidgety smile, nodding as if to say, "Nice, eh?" Gaslow peered back down, and then a section of the railing detached from its mooring with a screech and swung out, leaving nothing but space between Gaslow and a deadly fall. He teetered for a moment before regaining his balance, and with the help of Vakan, who shot out a beefy hand to grab his collar and haul him swiftly backward. Gazlo whipped a glare at Noggenfogger, his pointed ear rigid. Had this been Noggenfogger's aim, to stage some sort of accident? As newly installed head of the Bilgewater Cartel and de facto representative of his race to the Horde, Gazlo was aware he had enemies, but he honestly hadn't thought an attempt on his life would come this soon, let alone be this ham-fisted. Gazlo narrowed his eyes. Look, Noggenfogger, I don't know what you think you know about me, but I don't die that easy. At that, Vakan planted himself between Gazlo and the mine boss, scowling. Whoa, 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 Trade Prince. Look at me, Noggenfogger. I would never do that. In fact, I'm just as shocked as you are. For what it was worth, Noggenfogger had gone a deadly shade of pale green, though whether this was from the realization his murderous scheme had failed, or because he was truly taken by surprise, Gazlo couldn't say. Believe me, he said, surveying the platform, that was an accident. This calamitous breach of construction will not go unpunished, let me assure you. Vakan took a step toward Noggenfogger, cracking his knuckles with a deep grumble, but Gazlo put out a hand to stay the orc. He had no reason to trust Noggenfogger. In fact, at this point, he knew that he couldn't. But he did see that the head of the Steamweedle cartel was at least as unnerved as he was. Before the tour, Noggenfogger had made it quite clear that he hadn't even wanted Gazlo down there. While flipping through the financial statements, he offered Gazlo more than one drink, and knowing Noggenfogger's reputation for poisons and elixirs, Gazlo had repeatedly He'd only begrudgingly arranged for a brief overview of the operation at Gazlo's insistence, rambling on about how his time here was limited for the day, what with having a whole other city to run. Ultimately, Gazlo had used the power of the Horde to strong-arm Noggenfogger into agreeing. With a practiced eye, Gazlo ascertained that the platform had been assembled hastily within the last few days. He ground his teeth together. This is the problem I keep encountering, he murmured to Vakan. Our people are smart but erratic. Genius ideas, inconsistent execution. We solve difficult logistical problems, but all too often it's the fact that we don't pay attention to the details, to quality control, that undoes our best efforts. The orc crossed his arms and grunted in agreement. In the wake of all that had happened since the disappearance of the former leader of the Bilgewater cartel, Jaster Gallywix, Gazlo had taken pains to inspire the people in his cartel to aim higher and to convince others to do the same. He promoted those who paid attention to detail, who tightened bolts an extra turn and measured twice before they cut. He paid his crew better than anybody else, and the results spoke for themselves. He'd always been known for getting things done, and he'd never disappointed. He looked over at Noggenfogger. For now, I'm willing to believe you didn't just try to off me. For now. So, lead on. Noggenfogger gave a relieved smile. Smelting and sluicing's up ahead, next juncture. They walked on toward an opening in the distance, stepping over oily puddles. This kind of thing, Gazlo said, waving one hand to indicate the entirety of the mine. A lot of the Horde doesn't respect goblins. Noggenfogger blinked his beady gray eyes. Gazlo ducked under a sagging support beam. Some folks think we're unreliable. He pointed back toward the broken railing. Greedy. He fixed Noggenfogger with a pointed look. Disrespectful. That assessment strike you as accurate? Truth be told, those prejudices deeply bothered Gazlo, but before he could tackle the Horde's opinion, he would first have to change how goblins perceived one another. This mine was a microcosm of a larger problem. Rushed jobs, shoddy craftsmanship, poor upkeep, overworking people, and management smiling broadly while siphoning off the fat paycheck. Noggenfogger barked a bitter laugh. Like their hands are so clean, he snorted. Anyways, we hold our own just fine. Most goblins aren't even part of the Horde, or the Alliance for that matter. They value their independence too much. As they approached one end of the vast chamber, Noggenfogger began yammering about how smoothly things were going, praising his own management. I tell you, the engineers are always doing engineering stuff. We got explosive guys working explosives, we got drillers, delvers, diggers, and drivers. I started shifts going day and night, and nobody leaves till their quota's been filled, he laughed. Not if they want to get paid. Gazlo nodded, scoping out the miners. The overseers worked with enthusiasm, shouting threats with bullhorns into the pace. But the pace, Gazlo could see, showed the telltale signs of overwork. Here and there, diggers stopped to lean on their shovels. Gazlo, one of the best engineers of his generation, could see indications that the steam-powered ore shearing machine wasn't operating properly. He could hear a piston misfiring. He could see and smell the acrid smoke that told him the engine was burning more oil than it should. An audible rattle suggested that the rock chomper would need repairs sooner rather than later, and he could see the same issues throughout the cavern. The place was full of death machines, and more death machines. Gazlo picked his way down a slope crumbling with debris and approaching a miner transporting ground ore into a cart with a wheelbarrow. Not far from a rocket-powered drill sitting idle, dripping some kind of noxious-smelling goop into the dirt. The worker spilled his haul and swore, "Hey pal, over here, how's it going?" The miner wiped a blackened hand across his sweaty brow and rested on his shovel. "Well, to be honest," he started, but stopped when he saw Noggenfogger peering down at him. Noggenfogger wore a carefully neutral face. "Go ahead." "Split spark," the miner grimaced. "Sir," he added hurriedly. "Split spark, that's right. Tell Mr. Gazlo how it's going down here." The worker glanced at his overseer, whose stony face was an unmistakable warning. It's aces. As great as Mr. Noggenfogger. Couldn't be happier. We're, moving ore like nobody's business. So," he motioned to the wheelbarrow, "I gotta get back to work. Those quotas ain't gonna fill themselves." He busied himself with collecting his spilled haul. Gazlo motioned toward a barrel of water. "Sure you don't want to rest? A drink?" Splitspark wiped his perspiring brow, unwittingly showing angry blisters on his hands. "Oh, no, I had some water yesterday, thanks." Noggenfogger smiled and beckoned Gazlo away. "You see? Hunky-dory. Happy miners, happy engineers, happy drivers, happy drill bits. Happy customers. And my operation is clean." Gazlo glanced at Vakan, who just blown a loud snort of offense and disgust. "Look, Foggy. Noggenfogger." "Yeah, whatever." "Whatever? Now that's a goblin being disrespectful. You seem to be forgetting I'm the leader of the Steamwheel Cartel, Gazzy." Gazlo cackled. "And you seem to be forgetting that I'm trade prince of the Bilgewater Cartel. So lying to my face, is that really how you want to start this relationship?" Noggenfogger sputtered and his bodyguards started to unsheath truncheons, but Noggenfogger waved them to halt. "Well, that's about as much time as I got for today," he said. Gazlo climbed back up the hill of debris to join him. "Let's say we keep going." Noggenfogger bristled for a moment. "With respect," he growled, "I didn't think you'd be here for so long, and I got meetings and whatnot to tend to in Gadgetzan, so we're doing this," Gazlo assured him with a smile, gesturing for him to continue leading the way. "With respect, I'm sure you wouldn't let Gadgetzan get this bad, would you?" Noggenfogger mumbled and guided Gazlo further into the mine, their bodyguards trailing them from a distance. "I'm recording the story here, friend. Remember why I told you to go watch TV in your room?" "Okay." "Okay, go back and watch it, please." Okay, where was I? Okay. "I know what you're trying to sell me here, and I'm not buying it," Gazlo said, climbing over a collapsed pipe. "What I'm seeing is your people are overworked and underpaid. Your engineers and tinkers ain't motivated. Your machines ain't getting maintained properly, and that's dangerous." Noggenfogger started to object. Gazlo raised a finger, then pointed back to where they'd left the shearing machine. "I can hear the bolts rattling on the rock chomper. So the most generous interpretation here is that this guy's great with elixirs and potions and whatnot. He's even used a Marin. Maybe he doesn't know anything about mining, and a little bit too much about the bottom line." Noggenfogger snorted. "The bottom line is king. Nobody cares about maintenance. They care about results." Gazlo grabbed the hand of the nearest worker, revealing the same angry bandage wounds he'd seen on Splitspark. "Skipping maintenance impacts results, with your people as much as your machines. How can you expect your engineers to grip a wrench with hands like these?" "Sure, we get a lot of workers calling out sick, but that's any job," Noggenfogger countered. Gazlo sniffed deeply and felt the rank rasp of oily fumes in his nostrils. "And the air. You know it ain't good." You're using cheap fuel and rancid oil. You gotta burn cleaner, get the ventilation systems up, and try to pass this off as a clean outfit? Come on, Foggin Niffler. Noggenfogger. Marin Noggenfogger. Noggenfogger glitch. And it ain't a lie, I'm clean. Most of that stuff doesn't rise to my level of oversight, so I got plausible deniability of all that mess. Gazlo glared back. That ain't what running a clean operation means. Clean means you're not polluting. Noggenfogger's eyes went wide, and he hastened to smooth down his pure white suit, which had become increasingly wrinkled and stained with greasy droplets. Oh, well then no. The work gives off a natural vapor. What am I supposed to do about that? That's what you call a misunderstanding of frankly consuming terminology. Frankly confusing term. Gazlo gestured for Noggenfogger to cross a creaky catwalk first. Noggenfogger hesitated far too long before obliging, then Gazlo followed. Look, this ain't just about your bottom line. There's more work we could all have from the Horde. Maybe more folks, too, if we can run a tighter outfit together. But how am I supposed to talk a shaman or a druid with your mind belching out this smog? How can we convince clients you're reliable when you got workers out every day with injuries like that? Look, you come in here, you got no idea what I've had to do to get to where I am. You think it's easy scheming your way into a mayorship or the top slot in Steamweedle? The palms I greased, the elixirs I concocted? Story time, what's up, Shogun? Gazlo laughed. That don't make you special. I rose through the Steamweedle system just like you. Besides, your rivals and enemies seem to mysteriously go toes up a lot more than the average. Allegedly, Noggenfogger corrected. Gazlo cocked an eyebrow. Seriously? Okay, sure. I may be the best alchemist there is, Noggenfogger backpedaled. And I got my famous elixir and the occasional other stuff. But that ain't the point. I had to compete with the likes of Gallywix and the Venture Company, and now I'm the boss here, so I should get to call the shots. Me, and a lot of other goblins, believe that if I don't take things this far, I'll be replaced, or worse. Besides, I didn't see anyone making Gallywix clean up his act. No one stops the Venture Company, but I'm the bad guy? Gazlo paused. I know you know what happened to Gallywix. I know he had to split, but he's got nothing to do with Steamweedle or this mine. You had occasion to deal with him running Gadgetzan? Yeah, he was a bastard. I hated his guts, but I respected how he did business. Did you? Did you respect how he took advantage of his own people and put them to work in his mines after taking everything they owned in exchange for transport away from Mount Kajaro when it was erupting during the Cataclysm? I mean, yeah, harsh, but that's dedication to profit. That's what's going on here? Allow me to explain something. Having injured and sick workers using poorly maintained machinery eats into the bottom line. It's short-term gain for long-term loss. Fixing your tools now, having happy, healthy employees now, is an investment, and a damn good one. This ain't how we've always done it. Gallywix wasn't a businessman. He was a con man and a criminal. Profit above everything else ain't good business. A lot of people wanted him gone. His own mother tried to assassinate him. Twice! He solved a lot of problems, and he made worse ones out of them. He got stuff done, but he wrecked more. I asked him once if it bothered him taking advantage of those refugees and working his own people to the bone. You know what he said? It's the Goblin way. Supply and demand. Deal with it. Noggenfogger shrugged. That is the Goblin way, right? No, it ain't. That was Gallywix's way. Goblin way is invention, innovation, partnership. Those things cost a lot, but they earn a lot for every goblin, not just a few, Gazlo said. I swear you're missing my point on purpose. Supply and demand is one way to do things. But we can't only be thinking of ourselves no more. The world is changing. There's nothing wrong with how I run this mine, Noggenfogger protested. Maybe it's no day at the spa, but production is up ever since I took over. Find myself slipping into this accent. It's gross. Noggenfogger's attitude put Gazlo in mind of another goblin leader he had hoped to forget, because his legacy was as bad as in its own way as Gallywix's. Notorious all over Azeroth for their lumber and mining operation, which was to say clear-cutting forests and strip mining areas, leaving barren scars across the land. and the way they operated their oil rigs was reckless at best. Not to mention their arms dealing with groups that neither Horde nor Alliance found palatable. Heard of Mogul Razdunk? Gazlo inquired. Of course. Former head of the venture company. We modeled this operation on theirs. Of course you did. Razdunk was aggressive, he said, but again, he didn't consider the repercussion of his actions, and it caught up to him. He oversaw the venture company through expansion in Mulgore, the Stone Talon Mountains, Voltiris, Grizzly Hills, Philazar Basin, and Stranglethorn. But here's the thing. Everywhere they go for a quick buck, it pisses people off, and folks find a way to fight back, to make it harder and harder for them to do business. Pretty soon, everyone there is attacking them, but they just keep doing it. Noggenfogger looked less concerned, less certain. That's the market though, right? Business is business. Gazlo shook his head. Business is personal. When you wreck someone's home, that's personal, and it's bad for business. They arrived at a sluice town, a collection of tin shacks that stood hard up against the sluices that ran already dirty water over the crushed rock to create a slurry that would separate ore from waste. The ore was run to a massive smelting plant, which melted the rock and purified the ore into metal. This was even worse than Gazlo had expected. The dim lights flickered badly. The air was oily and stale. His eyes burned a little. Gazlo wheezed. You gotta get this place ventilated. The air? You gotta know this ain't sustainable. Sustainable? Noggenfogger scoffed. What are you now, a shaman? Gazlo shrugged. I've been called worse by better people, but I'm glad you mentioned it. Part of why I'm here is that the elements themselves have taken offense to stuff like what's happening here. And what the venture company does, I'm hearing Azeroth is about out of patience with us and you, Mayor of Gadgetzan, leader of the Steam Weedle cartel, and yeah, head of this operation. You gotta take your share of responsibility for that. Noggenfogger harumphed. Gazlo had seen enough. He gestured, and Noggenfogger led them back into the shearing cavern, where Gazlo called out a goblin working a machine. Hey pal, how many times has that machine broke down? This week? 5, he replied plainly. And how much production time has that cost you? The goblin resignedly turned his palms skyward. Gazlo turned his eye back onto Noggenfogger. And exactly how many sick days has your employees taken because of injury, poor conditions? Noggenfogger hesitated. Well, you know about as much about your operation as Razdunk did. He thought he was going to get rich and become a trade prince. What he got was blown up by gallywigs. Don't worship these jokers, Gazlo said. Don't model yourself on them. There are better models. Look at the Horde Council. Noggenfogger scowled. How do you get on the Horde Council anyway, eh? What makes you so special? Nothing. The difference between me and the other trade princes is I don't think the world is just here to feed me. I learned a while back you do better when you don't make it all about you. Noggenfogger looked put upon. So what? You arrive, tell me what I'm doing wrong, and then throw me to the wolves to fix it? I get the short end and you go enjoy tea and crumpets? Meh. I don't much like crumpets. Look, I know we got a steep uphill climb, but if we don't change our business, and I mean all of us, all the goblins, not the mind, we're gonna get left behind. We need to start lifting each other up instead of seeing each other as competition, and I'm hoping that you and I can start together. Noggenfogger took a step back. Beady eyes went wide, and then scowled again, suspicion written all over his sallow face. Now it makes sense. It's not enough you got the Bilgewater under your thumb, and probably still some of Steamweedle, and your pals in the Horde to back your play. You want my little mining operation for yourself. I ask for help, you move in and take over. You're as bad as Gallywigs. In fact, you're worse. At least he was honest about how downright foul he was. Gazlo sighed, pinching the bridge of his long nose. I don't want the mine. I didn't want to be head of the Bilgewater cartel. I didn't want to have to represent all goblins to the Horde. I mean, between you and me, that's a lot of pressure. He gazed at the whirring shear wistfully. I could be watching speed barge races, he mused. Then why'd you take it? There are plenty of goblins who'd killed your whole family for either of those. I'm probably one of them. Gazlo looked sharply at Noggenfogger, but the mine leader didn't care. And you got them both, Noggenfogger concluded. Some smart guy once said, if somebody really wants to be the boss of everything, under no circumstances should they be allowed to have the job. He stared fixedly at Noggenfogger. Noggenfogger looked abashed. Because they're only in it for themselves. Gazlo smiled. He can be taught. Nagenfager snorted. You can't tell me you don't enjoy all that power. Oh, make no mistake, being powerful is better than being powerless. If I wanted to be bigger than Gallywix, I could have that. I'm honestly not interested, but like I said, it's more about the responsibility. The other reason is, you want something done, you ask a busy person. What's that supposed to be? Council chose me because they knew I get things done. Plus, Gazlo added, they know I'm a goblin of my word and loyal to the Horde. Big deal. I've got loyal friends in the Horde. We both know that ain't true. Even I was selling to both sides for a while, and there's plenty of goblins who think gold is gold. Nagenfager smirked. Well, you can't spend honor, can you? Excuse me. Gazlo turned away. Oh, I'm joking. Nagenfager furrowed his brow. Look, what you're saying is great, but how I run things here, it's just how it's done. As if on cue, the sound of mechanical grinding filled the air, followed by an explosion. And plenty of shouting. The huge shearing machine's engine was venting steam, and workers carried injured operators to safety. Nagenfager swore, deliberately avoiding Gazlo's gaze. This is gonna hold up production. Hey! He screamed at the workers. Back to work, and somebody fix that! Tinkers and engineers gathered around the machine, which continued to smoke. Head machinist out, injured, one worker shouted. Two other workers lifted blunted and broken tools, exchanging looks of defeat. Nagenfager looked on, helpless. Whatever else you might be, Nagi, Gazlo urged, you ain't dense. I think you could turn this place around, and I can help you. But you gotta be willing to play nice and not just with me. Nagenfager looked unmoored. Our whole system is built on competition, not cooperation. It's how we solve problems. Survival of the fittest, the cleverest, the most ruthless, the best deal makers. It's how we innovate. Why are you trying to fix what ain't broken? Oh, it's broken, and I'm gonna show you why. This ain't the Goblin way. They headed closer to the blast radius. The bodyguards joined them. As they approached the drill site, the workers saw them coming and gave way to clear a path. Gazlo heard murmurs and knew the workers were confused that he was there. Heck, they were confused that Nagenfager was in attendance, if not there to threaten them. Gazlo approached several engineers gathered around the open hood of the engine, and Nagenfager followed. All right, what's going on? An older goblin in grease-stained overalls glared. Don't get your pantaloons in a twit. He stopped, and he realized to whom he was talking. Oh, Mr. Nagenfager, sorry. Look, this beast is long in the tooth. We've been washing out filters instead of replacing them. It's gunked up. The vibrations take a toll. I mean, we've been tightening bolts left and right, but eventually the threads get stripped, and they just won't hold. The gaskets are kind of shot, and the differentials keep slipping. This machine alone's going to take a fortune to fix. I can't afford to have this offline for long, Nagenfager told Gazlo. My clients expect shipments on a regular. This'll put me behind. You let me take some of that heat. Will you put the work in here? Gazlo asked. Nagenfager looked grim, but there were no better options before him. I'll give it a shot. Gazlo took a step toward the machine. Tinker, right? What's your name? Ollie Spracknozzle. You? You're Mr. Gazlo. Call me Monty. Yeah, Spracknozzle. You know Skagit? Used to be head of the Tinkers Union here. He's one of my crew. Think he's mentioned you more than once in the positive, Ollie. Spracknozzle cracked a grin. He's good people. Then he looked hesitant. Look, excuse my asking, but what are you doing here? We, Gazlo gestured to himself and Nagenfager, are here to help. Ollie screwed up his face. No offense, but this is a mechanics thing, not a... He paused, clearly seeking a word that wouldn't offend. Big shot thing. Bosses don't help. They boss. Gazlo grinned. Let's see if we can change that particular perception. Nagenfager was at least savvy enough to grimace non-committally, so as not to actively antagonize the crowd. His bodyguards and miners were both on edge. Still Gazlo continued. As it turns out, Ollie, I happen to be a fair engineer myself. Mind showing us the problem? The tinker hesitated, clearly not used to deference from bosses, then shrugged, motioning one hand toward the engine. At that, Gazlo removed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. He gestured to Spracknozzle's tool belt. I didn't bring my own, Ollie. You mind? What are you doing? Noggenfogger hissed, pulling Gazlo aside. Gazlo stooped beside the broken machine. What's it look like? Fixing this thing. You're gonna make me look bad. Well, hell, Noggenfogger. You say you're a good leader and hustler, so hustle. Get your people in here to help. Gazlo paused, an idea taking shape. In fact, yeah, one of them elixirs of yours. It literally makes people tiny, among other things. Break out whatever stats you got. Give it to your tinkers and engineers, and actually get them in there to help me fix it. Noggenfogger gaped. Sorry, give it to them? For free? He hissed under his breath. The ingredients alone, big picture. Gazlo glared at the mine leader, who gritted his teeth, wrestling with the idea. Fine, Noggenfogger stomped off. In the next half hour, Noggenfogger, somewhat reluctantly, returned with a case of his special elixir and gave it to a platoon of somewhat reluctant machinists, engineers, and tinkerers who had volunteered to help Gazlo fix the rock chomper. They got to work. Gazlo was in his element now, under the hood solving a mechanical issue, oblivious to the growing crowd of workers trying to figure out what was going on. Noggenfogger looked on, tapping his foot, glancing around. He moved alongside Ollie. Spracknozzle, the workers, who got hurt, how many? 4, Mr. Noggenfogger. Tell them, Noggenfogger winced, that with no admission of culpability, mind you, I'm gonna take care of them. Like medically, I mean. I've got something to make them right. Ollie looked at Noggenfogger as if he'd spoken gibberish. He opened his mouth to respond, but had trouble finding words. That'll be a load off their minds. Noggenfogger nodded. A gap-toothed grin spread across Ollie's face. I'll let him know, sir. Noggenfogger took a deep breath, then addressed the crowd. This may take a while, but don't worry. We'll get this fixed as soon as possible. So you all, take the rest of the day off. The workers didn't quite know how to respond. With pay, he said with a sigh. The crowd cheered, even as most of them stayed. There was entertainment value to what was happening now. Gazlo, working on the engine, smiled in the darkness of the machine's underbelly. His plan had worked. Hey, Noggenfogger, he called out. You want to see how to fix one of these things? Noggenfogger stooped beside him. Yeah, he said, peering into the open engine compartment where the tinkerers were gathered around Gazlo. I'd appreciate it. Gazlo grinned. Maybe this was going to work even better than he thought. After his team added a greasy solution to one thing, replaced a few stripped gears and cracked bolts and gaskets, as well as doing some preventative maintenance, Gazlo turned the final screw, stood, and wiped his hands on his pants. That should do it, he nodded, and the machinist pulled a lever. The machine began to rumble and putter before it let out a healthy whir. Noggenfogger let out a sigh of relief. The workers looked on in a bit of shock and surprise, while those who had helped out from the inside congratulated each other, once the elixir wore off and they regained their size. Noggenfogger's bottom lip puckered out as he regarded the empty case of his famous elixir, and he studied Gazlo warily. You're serious. You want to help, not take over. Gazlo nodded. Knew you weren't dense, though you may want to reconsider wearing white when making your rounds next time. Noggenfogger sagged a bit. Okay, I'll admit, I could use the help. But you know how tough it is to change things? Can I pay my people more? Some, I guess. At that, a few workers within earshot gave him reproachful looks. Healthcare? I don't even know what that looks like, but I could find a place for a clinic or something. Maintenance, I get. But I don't have enough tinkers as it is, and the ones I got ain't worth a bucket of warm spit. The tinker behind him scowled, mumbling a profanity before stalking off. Gazlo shrugged. Or they're feeling misused and therefore not giving you their best. And maybe you don't remember what it's like, Mr. Horde Counselor, Noggenfogger said, but I got people around me. People who don't like profit margins getting into. If I can't produce, they'll find someone who can. Can you help with that? Besides, if word gets out that I'm going soft, what happens then? And you got an opportunity to show them what's what. Noggenfogger's nostrils flared. I'm serious, Gazlo. You know what I'm talking about. Other cartels, other trade princes are always just looking for a sign of weakness to pounce. And you know they'd see me doing all that, costing us money, and going in for the kill. Gazlo took that in. Okay, you may have a point there. Damn straight I do. What if Steamweedle had Bilgewater backing your play, taking a little heat off of you? The two biggest cartels working together. Then you'd be working from a position of strength. Noggenfogger weighed his trust. In the meantime, Gazlo added, maybe you could put that big alchemy brain to work on the opposite of poison. What, an antidote? Gazlo snorted. No, genius. Cures for diseases, health potions, medicines. Oh, right. Well, I already got some things in the works. You weren't thinking for free, were you? Gazlo crossed his arms. Sure was, but I consider it more an investment than a giveaway. Noggenfogger cursed under his breath. A lot of work, but yeah, fine. His eyes lit up. Plus, it's a whole new revenue stream. Ha! Let him call me soft then. He looked at Gazlo. You don't want commission on that, do you? Gazlo chuckled. I'll give you that one for free. Noggenfogger nodded, now grateful. I guess I appreciate you coming down here after all. Gazlo regarded Noggenfogger. Humility is a rare quality in a goblin, especially in a boss. Tells me you're not a lost cause. Noggenfogger squinted. I'm not sure whether you just complimented me or insulted me. Gazlo smacked his lips. What about that drink? Well, you show me the real books. Noggenfogger winced. You saw through that one, eh? Gazlo sipped from his glass of Badlands bourbon in Noggenfogger's well-appointed office, which overlooked the mining operation like an eyrie. Noggenfogger had opened the ledgers, the real ones this time, he assured Gazlo. And it was pretty much as Gazlo had suspected. Drafting, insufficient reinvestment, and skimming from the workers. Standard operating procedure for goblin bigwigs for as long as Gallywix had held the reins. In fact, it wasn't just Noggenfogger taking a bite out of the profits, other bosses were as well. Meaning it could be dangerous for Noggenfogger to rock the boat. If so, he could lose more than money by making it stop. I see room for improvement. You see how much I'd need to do? Noggenfogger leaned back in his armchair. Even if I play it totally straight, upgrading the machinery, putting all those safety regs in place, healthcare, paying folks more, I'm gonna be in the red in no time. Rebuilding this place? It's gonna cost a fortune. It's not just my profits that'll be affected. Maybe things are different in the Horde, but the other goblins, even trade princes, have others trying to get their cut, and everyone who gets a cut will be looking to get things back to the old way. Gazlo sipped his drink. Like I said, I got a reputation as someone who gets things done where the Horde is concerned. Noggenfogger wrapped his long nails on the wooden desk. Thought you sold to both sides. At a certain point, I realized that while gold might spend the same, what happened with the things the gold bought didn't always feel right. Something changed in me after Garrosh was defeated, and I got summoned to repair the damage he left behind in Orgrimmar. You been? Noggenfogger shook his head. Gazlo continued. I was chief engineer there for a while before I started up Ratchet for Steamweedle. Thrall himself asked me to survey the damage. You met Thrall, right? Thrall the war chief? Not war chief no more. Noggenfogger grimaced. I've seen him from a distance once or twice. The guy's larger than life. Not that I'd ever tell him this, but I was still a little in awe. I've seen plenty of leaders who rule by violence and fear, or by outmaneuvering their opponents and their friends. I've seen leaders who ruled through moral arm twisting. But Thrall, he's different. He's decent. Noggenfogger cocked a skeptical, bushy eyebrow. I mean, not for nothing, but he named the city after his best friend. He named the continent after his dad. Gazlo considered that. Okay, fair point. But they had to name things something. Anyway, Thrall could have been war chief as long as he wanted, but he could have ruled the Horde and maybe the world. He never seemed to want it. He's so earnest. Noggenfogger gestured impatiently. So he brought you in, gave you the 5 copper tour, and the place was a mess. But between all that destruction, I noticed Thrall greeting people by name. Hundreds of people. Somehow he knew the names of folks so far beneath his station that they should have been invisible. The big guy just radiated compassion, empathy, whatever it was. I'd never encountered it from anyone before. And everywhere he went, these people who'd had their homes, their lives, everything destroyed. They trusted him to help set it right. That trust, it was something I didn't see enough of between our people. We finished the tour, the drag, the bank, the Valley of Strength, the Zeppelin Tower, and he asked me how much it'll cost to rebuild it all, better than it was. Gazlo concluded. Now I realize he's in a bind, and he came to me because, well, I'm the best. Plus, I've helped out before. He trusts me. Had him over a barrel. That's one way to look at it. Thing is, the way I want to do it, mixing materials, building stronger and whatnot, means more labor, more machines, higher shipping costs, and so on. And I gotta make a profit too. I got mouths to feed. So I give Thrall my bid for the gig. You should have seen his face. Didn't go for it. He was set back on his heels, hard. But I explained what needed done, and he agreed to convince the Horde. Noggenfogger flashed his teeth. Heh, sucker. The point, Gazlo rubbed his forehead frustrated, is he treated me as an expert, a master of my craft. I named the figure, and even though he was unhappy about it, he didn't haggle or argue me down. He showed me respect. The leader of the whole freaking Horde. I guess that's hard to come by. It is exceedingly rare, my friend, and hard earned. But you and your crew at least gave him their money's worth. Gazlo gazed at Noggenfogger, who now seemed even more receptive to the message he needed to convey than he had seemed earlier. I'm going to tell you something I've never told anybody before, he said, leaning in. Noggenfogger leaned in as well. This is where big picture thinking comes in, Gazlo explained. Since he showed me respect, he made me want to earn his respect. What I understood at that moment was Thrall would do anything for his people, and I was going to do everything in my power to make sure that my people did the best work we'd ever done. That's what he does. You get to know him. He makes you want to live up to his standards. Unlike Gallywix. Well, like I said, Gallywix was a sociopath. He offered to do it cheaper, but no, Thrall came to me. So what did you do? Gazlo made Noggenfogger wait for it. I dropped my price for him. Noggenfogger stared and shook his head. Gazlo chuckled. You should have seen his face then. Like it didn't compute that a goblin's first, last, and only thought wasn't just filthy lucre. You're telling me you didn't make bank on that job? Oh, I made a profit. Just not as much as I could have. Point is, it made the war chief respect me more, and I assume he didn't keep it to himself. I'm hoping it was the first step to changing how everyone else in the Horde sees us, and maybe how we start looking at ourselves. He pointed down at the repaired shearing machine. That accident down there? There was an accident where we were rebuilding too. Folks from all the races of the Horde pitched in to help and get things back on track. Everyone and everything was taken care of. Seeing that changed how I look at the world and what I wanted out of it. Be part of something bigger than outdoing the guy next to me, Gazlo. My whole crew will tell you we were proud of the job we did, and we were even prouder that we did it for the Horde. He tipped his glass to Noggenfogger. Now I want to share that with you. Noggenfogger frowned. You want me to be proud of being a goblin? I want all of us, Gazlo waved his hand to indicate all goblins in general, to be proud of being goblins. I want us to be proud of what we can build, and I want the Horde to be proud to be associated with it. I want us to start looking to the future, to stop treating each other as enemies, and understand that not everything is transactional or a zero-sum game. He leaned back and put up his feet. What we did back there at the site, did you see how that mattered? Yes. No. I don't know. How? Gazlo gave a genial smile. Because nothing changes the atmosphere. Nothing gains your people's respect like a boss who wants to help and is willing to learn and compromise. It'll move mountains. Noggenfogger squinted at Gazlo. I just still can't figure out your angle. No angle, buddy. If we don't start helping each other out, we're going to tear each other apart until there's nothing left of us. Noggenfogger didn't argue. He looked at as introspective as he was ever going to look. That he raised his glass. To a new way. To a new way. That's the end of that one. Alright, 45 minutes in. We're doing pretty good. That's about how long these stories have taken. It's about 45 minutes. They're about 30 pages. And they're not all, it's not like 30 straight pages. There's like inserted pages with quotes from different paragraphs and a couple animations. Alright. I am going to take a quick breather. I don't know. I can't remember remember if I have a beer. I've just got this start. So I'm gonna put the starting screen back up. I'm gonna get up for a second, and then I will be back very shortly. All right. I have returned. There's going to be pre-roll ads for those of us watching live. About 12 minutes. I'll be in the middle of reading. I'm sorry. I am recording this for YouTube if you want to go back and watch it. So, be warned that that's about to happen. Well, I made it through that one without losing my voice. Throat's a little scratchy, but we're gonna power through. This next one is 41 pages, but it's not actually 41 pages. Like the last one is like 30. There's a bunch of blank pages for some reason, but we'll get through it. This is called The Lilac and the Stone by Catherine M. Valenta, I believe it. Again, another credits page where we got people like Sean Copeland and Steve Denuser and Chris Metzen. All those people. So, on to the story. This is told from the perspective of Mora. So, I'm not going to be speaking in a female voice. Female dwarf voice. Sorry to disappoint. I'm definitely not gonna be like sneaking into that Scottish dwarf accent, but we'll see how it goes. Among all the great, craggy, unfeeling boulders of our people, Dagran was always my flower. For all the good it ever did him, or me. You can imagine what it costs a gentle soul to grow up a dwarf. May even be worse than to come into this world saddled with the soul of a daughter instead of a son. That one singular roll of the bones determined much of my life before my fist found my mother's braid. My body robbed me blind with its first breath. It was a girl's, and therefore not what my father wanted. I am Moira Thorazan, daughter of Magni Bronzebeard and his bride Aemir, princess of Ironforge, widow to the Dark Iron Emperor, mother to his heir Dagran II, and I have been angry since I was old enough to walk the path set before me. Sometimes I think my anger will outlive me, that they will close up the earth over my body, and long after I am forgotten, some brutal, black, hardened jewel left from my rot will work its way up to the moss, out of the moss, hissing and spitting and still scalding hot. Maybe they will use it to warm a village somewhere. An eternity of cozy hearths and ready stews fueled by this bitter fury I carried but could never fully satisfy. I like the idea of that. For a long time, I wore my anger on my chest, glinting like one of the gems on that shield they can't stop squabbling over, as if it could shield me, could shield anyone. But in time, I learned the anger shown is anger wasted. It's only put it only puts others on guard, makes them fearful or defiant, pushes them to dig into defensive positions, fuels rumors of madness and whispers of revolt, blunts its own edge as even fear fades with overuse. So I learned to make that shield gem inside myself, pushing the rage deep down into the caverns of my heart, compressing it into a crusted geode of pain, all so that my husband's people might like me a bit better. All my mistakes have come from that horrid, boiling, crushed place inside me. Sometimes, I wonder who I might have been without it. Do not worry that my son will make those mistakes. I worry that he will never get the chance to make them. Because of all that, there is power in righteous fury. Poor Dagran does not have even that to protect him. In this great vast universe, that boy has never looked on anything with hate or disgust or fear or rage. Only curiosity and longing to understand. He has no fury to keep him safe. He has only me. But all these great officials who gather here to bicker over old jewelry will not suffer me to stand between him and their punishing world forever. And we welcome them, despite the ugly expectations they wish to shackle to my son. We welcome them to Quench Vessel Hall, my late husband's favorite retreat, a vast house built in the great caverns that make a whistling war flute of the subterranean plains that stretch out from Shadowforge City. We welcomed them, and they looked at my child like he was a particularly unimpressive carpet. Quench Vessel Hall is a pretty place, though too enormous to ever be called a home. Dagran and I both have paced out the rough rock clerestories and walkways, the polished black marble arcades over molten underground rivers connecting one vast wing to another, the silver-silled lancet windows and balconies woolly with fire bloom. One could walk for hours, staring out into acre after acre of luminous stalactites and glimmering stone, hours upon hours, and never leave the house. I have always walked to clear my head, and have a moment of quiet without those stomping bellowers demanding to be satisfied every second. There is never a second in the life of a queen regent without stomping, unsatisfied bellowers. Sometimes I think I see my son running ahead of me as he used to do, small and sweet and careless, laughing as I have not heard in many years. Then it is gone, vanished around a blue agate column into the shadows of my mind, and all that remains is regret and the problem. I've gone to several meetings now concerning the great shield discovered by explorers in the Badlands. I have examined the bloody thing closely, and it was bloody, splattered with the stuff, blackened and cracked and centuries dry. The battle side of it was quartered by a cross of three delicately braided metals, iron, bronze, and gold, dividing the massive surfaces into four images, faded by time and bludgeoned by experience. An ornate and delicate silver crown barnacled in black pearls and jewels of purple and green against a black field, with a great warhammer thrust through its circlet, whose pommel was a simple knuckle of plain, rough-hewn granite. An eagle and lion rampant adorsed on a field of white, and below them a branch bearing both orange blossoms and oranges in the mouth of a helpless lamb. A great iron goblet studded with chunks of onyx and amber and filled with blood prickled out of ruby dust. And last, a tower of black rock, its masonry cracking through the middle, engulfed in flames of topaz and garnet that spilled up and out into the other quarters, threatening them all. And all around these designs a border of that same braided metal, but with a fourth ribbon of silver on which is engraved runes so ancient not even the most learned scholars dare claim the capacity to read them, or even swear to it that they represent words at all. I've listened to the evidence and the arguments, both practical and born of passion, I've closely examined the artifact, and I have come to the definite conclusion that I do not care about that slab of metal and time-chewed leather. It is nothing and means nothing. Artisans with too much time on their hands trying to impress some long-dead king who wouldn't know rampant from passant, but I'm certain truly excelled at separating brains from skulls. It's a very finely made and rather expensive reason to fight, nothing more. Oh, is it for the Bronzebeards because the method of braiding such metal is so finely together is a secret among their smiths alone? Is it for the Dark Irons because the rubies and opals and onyxes were cut and finished in their style? Or is it for the Wildhammers because the eagle and lion together make the griffin? Do let us consult the heads of all the great families. Perhaps we could have a war about it. And so on and so forth for the whole long history of dwarven kind's struggle to stop being piles of rock and start being. We certainly will get around to finishing the process any day now, but not today. Today they argued, then quarreled, then thundered about, puffing up their deltoids like birds in mating season. Then various mothers were insulted, and the standard past crimes dredged up, then lunch. But lunch is never just lunch, oh no. Statecraft is tablecraft, on both sides of the board. I suspected this lot starved themselves for a month before they arrived, so that their vigor and appetite would cost the Shadowforge vaults as dearly as possible. It's all a dance, a pretty pantomime, each step careful, graceful, precise, even as we all pretend to be big, brawling brutes with sword pommels for brains. Even as we all know it's going to end up in a museum or a monastery where everyone can look at it, but few will ever take the time. It's absolutely exhausting. And I am so much better at it than they are. How could I not be? Not one of these walking belches ever learned to bake their own bread or bothered to scrub their own tables after they slopped ale all over it. Mind you, don't spoil the grain with your fat fingers, Grunthin Windwhip, Griffin's arse flea. Oh, has Thurn Barrelbane, the great batfart of Ironforge, let the oven get too hot and spoiled the morning loaves? How many times shall the cook beat him? No times whatsoever. They were born for better things, weren't they? They're so terribly good at pounding on tables with their fists and bellowing demands while I do the quieter work. It's beneath them to know a favorite meal can make a man more agreeable to a cause, or a luxurious bedroom set with the same flowers his mother once loved can soften his resolve, or sour ale that does not agree with his stomach can turn his temper against everyone equally, or how a silly little sticky latch on a stable might release his ram to mate with one of our ewes, and remind him how quite vividly of the value of alliances, or how guest gifts given with enough care can put him in debt without his ever even knowing has agreed upon terms. These proud stutterers think the dance of state begins at their arrival. They cannot imagine the music began weeks before, nor fathom the advantage of owning the dancing floor. Did I try to teach my son these things? Of course I did. It took so long to understand them myself. I resisted all that for years upon years. I didn't want to know. My mother's world, my mother's ideas, my mother's skills and subtleties when I wanted only to become my father, body, soul, mind, and throne. Not only become as he was, but for him to see it in me, see it for himself, and not because my dying mother told him to look. If I learned to bake the braided bread and spin the thinnest metal into linen thread and make it shine and memorize the leverageable childhood pains of every politically significant man in Cosmodan, I would still be nothing to him. Magni Bronzebeard would never turn his face to his daughter and see a son. So many mistakes because I wanted only to be like him, to solve every problem by making it. So much pain because other solutions didn't make me feel like my father's ale. So much ale spilled on so many tables. For what? It would take years for me to mold myself into the leader my people needed. To bury my anger, to learn the ways of the Dark Iron, to stop letting my father's disappointment steal me from. I had made mistakes in doing it for years. I had made mistakes in the doing of it, but it was I who was my husband's vision realized, who helped free the Dark Irons from the tomb of Ragnarok. And it was I who allied them with the other clans, who led them into the broader alliance. And it was only then that my father saw me for what I was, not whom he thought I should be. And I would never let this be the model for rearing my own son. Unlike the nobles braying about our table, my boy has baked his own meat pies of boar and bear, spun his own wool, stitched his own tunics, washed the stones of Quench Vessel Hall until they shone and he bled. The trouble has never been that he does not know how to play the game, that he refuses to play it at all. He will hole up with his books, pretend not to know these things. He will not behave like a dwarf, only like Dagron. And a flower among slabs of rock must appear to be stone or be crushed. The High Steward, Angren Coldfeet, appeared and set out the meal alone. Clan representatives ignored her as she entered. Who was she to them? Just an old woman. Might as well be a piece of broken furniture fit only to rest a mug of beer on, stooping and scuffling on the flagstone, her back camelled with age, eyes distant and glazed, arthritic hands quivering on the lip of a great gold platter stamped with the griffin sigils of Wildhammer, piled high with sugared morels and spiced haggis, blood sausages smothered in boiling brambleberry butter sauce imported from Kilfiris. Grunthan was such a greedy, plump little cake snatch when he was a boy. Never once wanted to hear his mother complain about how he stained his leathers with drips and glops of brambleberry butter sauce, but I am glad of her whining now. After settling Grunthan and Falstad Wildhammer, poor old doddering Angrid steadied herself as she slid a bronze platter stamped with the seals of Ironforge. The huge plate was crammed to the edge with icefin fillets, honey spiced lichen, tender boar stuffed with winter figs. Thurn Barrowbane licked his chops. Whenever he was ill, his old nurse made him honey spice lichen to suck on. Made him feel drowsy and agreeable, cared for and unthreatened. But Thurn had not come alone. None of the clan sent only one mouth to argue with. The Bronzebeard representative, my Uncle Muradin, reached eagerly for a fistful of Arctic char from Dunmoreau, his favorite, preserved out of season. And then there's my plate, blackened iron, bearing bitter greens, crayfish hearts still in their shells, and a round of red spice braided bread, seeded through with dried fruit, onions, bits of hard cheese, and morsels of bacon, big as my head and twice as pretty. I know all this because I planned it. I learned long ago that I detest surprises, so there was one I welcomed gladly. Angrid. Angrid is older than Magma. When the Emperor and I first came here young and in love and determined to fill every one of these rooms with a child, or at least exhaust ourselves trying, Angrid was already stark white with braid. As far as I know, she sprang whole from the fountain stones of this place when the first hammer struck the first slab. When we met, she was mistress of the kitchen, a bare spinster branch of a minor family's scrub brush. Now she is the singular gem set in Quench Vessel Hall's stark prongs. Nothing passes here that she does not know. But few who pass here know her, and that is how we two have devised it since I became a widow and she became my spy master. Ingrid's hands were perfectly steady as she poured hot vinegar into a stone bowl to dredge my crayfish through, because her hand is always perfectly steady, unless I tell her it ought not to be. I make apologies for her infirmary and her hearing trouble when she possesses neither. The great clan leaders do not care. They do not even see her. She is nothing to them. We devised a finger language when I was a young bride expecting to visit here often. Of course, I never got the chance to be an old bride. We became so quick and subtle at it that we could finish our conversations before anyone else thought to ask why I so incessantly played with my signet rings or touched the prongs of my fork or soundlessly tapped my knuckles with my thumb. Where's my boy? My fingers asked. Where else? In the library, hers answered. Still? What is he doing? Asked the raise of one eyebrow and sharp dip of my chin toward the north wing of the house. Nothing useful. No one ever sired an heir on a book, that's all I know, said the subtle movements of her fingernails on the edge of the plate, then tugging her wispy, snowy, mole-splattered mutton chops. I have come to love so dearly. Summon him. He ought to be here. He will not come, my queen. You know that. Stubborn like his father, and mine, and you. I tossed a shell heart onto the floor and sighed. Brothers, I'm nearly ready to call for my mace to break this bauble in 4 pieces. We can each take one home, pitch the last into the sea, and go back to our usual business, which is still warm and waiting for us. No one who thinks that would satisfy Ironforge ought to be called me brother, Thurn Barrelbane snarled. The shield belongs to us. How can you deny it? A child of the Bronzebeards yourself. Are your loyalties truly so bent to the Dark Iron when your son reflects the lineage of both houses? Subtle as a cudgel, this one. My first loyalty is, as ever, to our people. Grunthan snorted around the buttergrease mouthful. Oh, just let us fight it out, Mora. It's what we're going to do anyway in the end. I don't know why you're putting it off. This will all be over as soon as I am allowed to make my points clearly and efficiently. Windwhip held up one massive hand and then the other by the way of illustration. Arguments without fists are like sentences without punctuation. You might manage it, but why make so much more work for yourself and everyone else? Easier to do it right the first time. Falstad looked about to interject, but was cut off by Thurn. Oh, I heartily agree, the Bronzebeard's second slurred over gulps of ale. Since the start of this council, it's been too long since we've all had it out, either amongst ourselves or with some third party. Give us a fight, and more bottles of whatever this stuff is. More of this. Is there more of this? My own uncle looked me in the eye, his beard wet with food I paid for. He cleared his throat as if he meant to say something truly meaningful. She won't let it come down to blows. She knows she'll lose, Grunthan cut in, letting it lie there on the table like a new reeking corpse. No one could be so uncouth as to refuse. He was waiting for a laugh, a grin, but I indulged him only with a sigh. I know what I am. I know my way in this world. All the careful foods and flowers and codes and whispers will work, but with a dwarf, you will always have to use punctuation, too. As fast as my father ever taught me, I snatched the iron crab prong from its bowl, flipped my grip on the handle, and shoved it hard into the wild hammer idiot's knee below the table. He screamed in pain. Come on, Grunthan, my uncle said. You set yourself up for that one. I think we all know better by now, I twisted the prong into Grunthan's joint. His eyes bulged. I leaned in close with the eyes of all those men and their seconds, and even the creatures on the shield boring into me, waiting to see which way it would go before choosing a side. Cowards. Windwhip whelped, I hissed. Did I lose against the Frostmane while you huddled in your keep, fearing me more than the trolls who threatened our lands? Grunthan would not beg with his mouth. His eyes said it clearly and efficiently enough for all to see. Go clean yourself up, boy, Myrddin said, and you never saw a room empty itself faster. Except for my uncle, grinning fatly and smugly across the table. Thank you for the assistance, uncle, I said, not without amusement. Always happy to clear a bit of room for my niece to maneuver, Myrddin acknowledged, inclining his woolly head. I do hope you're right, and these lumps can be soothed by mummy's soup and daddy's favorite tune on the lute. But I fear you may not be able to leverage this weight so deftly. They're egging you on, looking to test Dagrin with all this. They want to see what he'll do, the kind of heir he'll be. They won't go or settle this until he gives them that show. Speared a crab with his own dagger, one with no fancy sigils or jewels, just a hard, sharp, cruel triangle of metal accustomed to use. I did all this for my son. I felt my face burn red. As heir to both thrones, he has the power to steer this council. Uncle, if proving himself to the council, to the powerful families, is only a matter of brute force, you know he'll never be able to pull it off. Trying to make another way, a way for him. Titans know he's not even here to pretend he's ready for them. Myrddin nodded sadly, and they know it. They look for him around the door frames, and every time he's not there, they question more and more whether he ever will be. The old dwarf put his hand on my arm. I know your father did not do right by you. He broke his promise to Amir to look out for you. Keeping someone safe does not mean you deny them the tools they need to make their way after you're gone. But it is not much wiser to protect Dagrin so fiercely that he doesn't believe he needs armor at all. or that he will ever walk in that armor alone. Burden slapped his knee with his broad hand and stood, adjusting his belt around his belly. The old Bronzebeard warrior glanced at the bloody fork on the floor. They'll want to reconvene in the morning. Bring him. He's of age. It's beyond time. He's a sweet enough boy, Mara, but he can't rule over dwarves if you won't even let him be one. There is no natural light in Quench Vessel Hall except for one place. The manor, the grounds, the stables, the armory, even the walls and rivers all sprawl, clatter, rise, and tumble deep underground. The stoas and corridors and buttress colonnades glow a faint red from the hot magma far below, illuminating somewhat every wall and arch, broken by occasional orange flames and faceted lanterns where the shadows grow too deep. Outsiders always found it dreary and oppressive. My people find it safe, reassuring, correct. But there is one place where a new husband, young enough to rip out a strip of the night sky for his wife's shawl if only he wanted it. If only she wanted it, ordered the craggy stone ceiling breached all the way to the surface, then had it thatched and engineered to clear with a clear, thick crystal to let in the sun and nothing else. And that single shivering shaft of daylight falls in the portrait hall, on a painting that should not be there, for it shows no dark iron ancestor or hero who earned their honor here. It is only a painting of my father holding my mother's hand gently and looking at her with a private, naked fondness that no paint should ever be able to capture. There is no path to the great library from the meeting vaults without passing through the portrait hall. It pained me to look on it now, after all that had come to pass. My parents, illuminated by my husband's love because I missed my home, never guessing how short a time I would be wed and why. Magni Bronzebeard, my father, who could not let me be or use me well. He held my mother as she died, ripped apart by ice trolls. He stared into the ruin of her guts and swore to be my true father, to be there for me always. Beside those nice words, his only action was to teach me to hit everything in my way as hard as I could. That is not how my father was taught. I suppose he thought it was, because he enjoyed the hitting parts most, so he remembered them best. But from the moment he drew breath, everyone from the nurses in the vales to the soldiers below in the courtyards believed him to be competently violent and strong. His education was to temper that natural steel with judiciousness. Good lord, words. Magnanimity, fairness, and the occasional necessary mercy. With my first breath, my father knew me to be inferior. Weaker, softer, sweeter scented, unserious, ignorable, small. Given a girl to raise to a throne, he deemed her education must be to cut that natural linen into the harshest battle tunic imaginable, because only at her strongest did she stand the slightest chance. I was given no philosophy of rule, no lessons from a foreign mage on the niceties of justice, never taught to hold back if I ever struck a blow to spare the weak or the innocent. A prince who does not use all his strength is still fearsome, even wise and merciful. A princess is merely that, a princess. She does not swing with every crumb of might. She may never get to swing a second time. But perhaps that is not fair. Magni thought those things. Magni arranged my world so. But there were daughters thought not so, sons as well. Perhaps because my father loomed so colossally in my view, I could not see that my pain was only his made flesh, and not every eye in the world was cast against me because I could not be a son. I tried to do better with Dagran. I did try, but I became lost somewhere in it, in the reflections of pain. And in trying to protect him as I was not, I protected myself and left him bare. Perhaps when I finally saved myself from this frozen prison of a promise half-kept, when I shone so bright and swung so hard in the depths of a dungeon that the Emperor himself raised me up and treated me as his future, loved me enough to let the sun into his stronghold only for me, when I became a queen in my own right, won in the battle of love, which is no less a war than any open plain churned with bodies. That man in the painting took it from me, my own father. He could not bear to let me own my birthright, but neither would he allow me another. And then my nurse in her veil put this tiny, wrinkled body into my arms and said, make him a king, make him a man, make him a warrior before whom everyone who could not see you for your father's shadow will tremble. What was I to do with it? What good could I be to this strange mirror of my dagger? Another dagger, but not another dagger, but not another. Nothing like my father or his mother. Nothing like his father or his mother. Born quiet and gentle and loving as I was not. No man I ever knew ever wanted to be. Born so happy and kind that Tooth Gnasher himself would let him kiss his nose, to whom violence would have to be taught, because he drew only wisdom from my breast. Oh, my son, what will you be with a mother like me? The cold sun filtered down through the crystal and lay like a hand against my mother's painted cheek. I watched the light move for a long while. Too long. So many years since I could bear to look up as I passed through the door to the library that inevitably held my son, no matter the hour. So many years since I could stand to look at the family that never was. On the stone wall behind the painting, a tangled knot of roots, branches, flowers had broken through the rock. Spring lilac, determined to live, slowly shattering its own foundation as it. But what could it do? Stop growing? None of us can. And there, beyond the grand door and the paintings and the lanterns, was Dagrin like a seed in its husk. Where Angrid said he would be. Where no one ever needed anyone to say he'd always be. The great library, Quench Vessel Hall, surrounded by books open to chapters and verses and illuminations on 1,000 different subjects, reading, as was his preference, 9 or so at once, jumping each like a butterfly, sampling flowers. Dagrin Tharzan II, beautiful and gentle and quick, hair of fright, fingers covered in ink, several seasons of being a man grown, eyes alight with interest and whatever peculiar excitement he took from those pages, as from no other source. On the southern wall, Dagrin had hung a length of parchment bearing a detailed, carefully shaded drawing of that damned shield and all its confounding mysteries. Half of it was painted in brilliant colors, precise colors of the real thing. Half was still stark charcoal line. It really was quite extraordinary likeness. Even the dried blood and dents were perfectly duplicated. Did you draw that, child? What? Dagrin asked, startled as if out of a dream. He groped for a pair of spectacles, a thing I had hardly seen a handful of dwarves come near in all my days, though only the gods know how many of them are half-blind and full proud enough to need them badly, but never admit it. The boy shoved them onto the bridge of his nose under this wild explosion of white hair, long ago fallen loose from its braid. Oh, that? Of course. Who else? Very good. You say so. Not really important. How not? All these men have swaggered here strapped with enough weapons to pass for porcupines over them. It's what I've come to talk to you about. Well, of course it is important, but it isn't at all. The shield is just leather and metal. It's nothing dreaming of being something. The drawing of the shield has as much meaning as the shield itself. Both can be true. See? When it came to Dagrin, I rarely saw. How long has it been since you've eaten? The heir of 2 clans hitched up his trousers like a babe not yet grown into them. So thin, so frantic with energy. He waved me off. I can eat any time, but I'm so close to figuring out. The words. It's the words I can't get. Dagrin flitted from book to book to book, some as wide as his own arms outstretched. There really isn't a language in Azeroth I don't have a toehold on. Some of the very dead ones I might only grasp the basics, but once you know one, the others sort of open up, like a puzzle box. There are only so many ways to put words and symbols together. I can't nail down a thing about the inscription. The runes don't play well in any tongue I've ever heard whispers of. So I thought I might be able to track down that tower. Maybe it's not just a pretty design, but a real fortress that existed somewhere, in some era. Then I thought I might be able to find the artisan who made it, match the style of those huge heraldic books I used to love. Do you remember? Of course I remember. Children always think they're the only ones who remember their childhood. But to do that, I had to understand the style well enough to recognize it elsewhere. And I never cared much for art, so I taught myself to sketch and paint. Taught yourself to do that? The boy shrugged. It wasn't that hard, and anyway, it didn't help, so I moved on to something else. There's something about the goblet that bothers me. He scrambled over to yet another huge tome, half forgetting I was there. Dagran, I have to talk to you. Hmm? Dagran, it's time. Time. Yes. You know, you're in this one, mother. I didn't ask. Nothing in a history book concerning me would be kind. Dagran, please. It's time. Your time. He stood up suddenly. All the blood ran out of his dear little face. Oh, he mumbled. Oh. Burden won't continue the negotiations without you. They've been counting minutes for you to come of age so they could be rid of me at last. I'd rather it keep being you forever, he said quietly. Such defeat. No one gets what they want, I snapped. Only the scraps from fate's table. Now, you've got to decide, and I cannot do it for you. Easy way or the hard way. Continue as one of 3 squabbling clans in the council, or seize the throne of both your bloodlines and break it. But if you take the latter, you may pay for it in blood. Dagran frowned. He never showed anger on his face. Most thought he had none of it in him, but I knew. His frown is another man's freak. And how am I to rule? Am I to be like Granda? He turned the page to a tome. My books say he is the reason father was slain. Or am I to be like you? He gestured at an open book. This says you were cruel, hasty, merciless. Is that what you want me to be? How should I not be angry? Oh, my love, books, they're such unfaithful things. Once you write something down, it's just exactly the same as if it really happened, even if it's not how the day itself went at all. I don't need to read that to know what it thinks of me. They'll tell you I was proud and unyielding, that I ruled with an iron fist. I ask you, what other sort of fist was I meant to use in Cosmodon? Better yet, what do I do that no king has done before and been called great for? He did not answer. Could not. There was no answer. Neither of us spoke for a long while. And anyway, I was young. Youth is foolishness, whether great or small. I am young too, Dagran said quietly. As for your grandfather, I continued quickly, hated him. For years, it's all I thought of, but, oh, did I really mean to say it? I did not want to, but you'll do so much for your only child, so much. Even tell the truth. But he did the right thing, from his point of view. Dagran, who never knew his father, snapped his spectacled face toward mine. There was a flash of fire there, after all. I don't believe that. I don't think Grandad does either. Tears poured down his face. Not feel. Tears poured down my face. I did not. This may be bitter soil to plant, my son, but it is spring, and you must, or there will be no harvest. Time for learning is over. Time for action has come, and I am so sorry it has. Please believe that I could take this burden for you. If I could take this burden for you, I would have long ago. I sighed and took a long glance at the half-finished painting, so skilled, so wasted. Look up when you leave this hall, above the door. You will see your last lesson. There are flowers that grow on naked stone and thrive. Then report to the meeting hall to address the council, 2 hours after dawn. My son straightened his shoulders, just as he had when he was small and running through these halls on a ribbon of laughter and dreams. I knew that proud little spine. He meant to talk back to me. Time for learning is never over. I sent Angrid to prepare the morning meal and lay it out for the dignitaries to feast on before the council meeting began, hoping full stomachs might soften whatever was to come. She returned far too quickly. Madam, her fingers said brusquely, there is nothing for me. It is done. Impossible, I replied, already fastening my cloak around my shoulders and pulling on my boots. But it was not. When I entered the great room, I saw a table already groaning, clusters of nobles already loosening their belts to let their bellies breathe. Grunt and Windwhip's knees were bandaged below the board, and he glared at me with one resentful eye. The table was perfect. Each dish matched to each lord, each mug of ale carefully watered to fuzz tempers, but not reason. And even the cutlery engraved with the seals of each dwarf's house and lineage. And Dagran Thorazon II stood at the head, where he had been pushed all of his life to stand, that he had set his table himself, relying on no servant to do his work. His fingers flashed briefly against his belt, quick and nimble. Mother, his fingers said, everything is going to be all right. I never taught him the signs Angren and I devised so long ago. I never taught anyone. He'd only watched for all his life and learned. Honored guests, the child began, and by the time he finished, he would be a child no longer. You were all fools. The peace of hunger sated vanished in a roar of fury from all assembled. Half a dozen hands went for half a dozen hilts. You are fools. Dagran held up his hands. He did not bellow, he did not roar, he did not strike a blow to cow the rest. But they listened as they never had, even when I did all those things. The bastards. You were fools, and it is exhausting. I know books are less entertaining than hitting each other because your precious feelings got hurt. Feelings? Screeched Grunthin, a bloom of blood appearing on his bandage as his stitches popped free. I do apologize. Would you prefer honor? There's little enough difference. Watch your tongue, lad, warned my uncle. I have. Very well. It is tongues that have troubled me so, that, he gestured at the inscription on the great ancient shield, that is no tongue recorded by any of the varied races of Azeroth. So why take the time to work it so finely into a shield? The gathered officials blinked in confusion. Dagran smiled patiently. A shield? What is a shield for? I confess I quite enjoyed watching these men who spat on me half my life squirm in their chairs like students who had shirked their lessons. Protecting the guts, one of the Bronzebeard's second ventured bravely. Yes, and in that capacity, what tends to happen to shields? Dagran led patiently. They get bashed in quite a fair bit, Muradin answered, beginning to catch on. Exactly, so why bother with all this fancy nonsense? Why take weeks upon weeks to paint and preserve and embed with jewels, to inscribe runes all the way around and cross the middle, to braid 3 metals together and filigree them like a lady's bracelet, just so someone can swing a mace into it and send all them pretty gems flying? I've seen your shields, and mine. I've stretched leather and beaten iron to make them. We're practical people. We wouldn't throw away the richness of our minds and the skill of our greatest minds on a shield. A sword? Perhaps. Parade armor? Possibly. A crown? Certainly. But a shield is not jewelry. It's a tool. This is a useless tool. Doubtful murmurs circled the table. More piles of pies and roast joints and fillets went into nervous gullets. Look at it. Every jewel is intact. If this shield ever saw battle, there'd be but empty prongs left. But it's got blood on it, and it does bear marks of action, learned Barrelbane protested. Does it? Asked Dagran thoughtfully, as though that had not yet occurred to him. Is that blood, or is it paint, or something even stranger? As for the little wounds on the metal here and there, Dagran asked Gunthorn for his stone hammer, Thurn for a war blade, me for my blade. He held each of them against the damage on the shield. None matched. Then the child who would be emperor pulled a small, delicate hammer and a pair of pincers from his own belt and laid them against the divots. The Explorers League tries to be careful, he chuckled ruefully. These are the marks of excavation tools. As for the blood, I will come to it in a moment. I have spent weeks in the library researching these sigils and marks, the workmanship of each aspect, the runes themselves, everything. And the answer is, you are all fools. Don't make them feel stupid, my fingers flashed. You won't get to finish showing off. This shield was never meant to be used in battle. It is a memorial, it is an apology, and it is a promise. Look again. Wildhammer, there is a griffin broken into parts that long to join. Tragic, weeping, separate, unable to feast on the lamb alone, no matter how rich. Look again, Dark Iron, there is your fortress, burning beyond salvation. Look again, Bronzebeard, there is your goblet raised in the great halls of Ironforge, filled not with blood, but with wine, and all alone, without your comrades to feast alongside you. Dagran raised his piercing eyes to me. Look again, mother. There's not only a crown in the upper quadrant, it's the queen's crown, and thrust through it a single hammer. Not a war hammer, Just a hammer to build, not to break, to raise up cities, not to raise them. This shield saw no battle, but was crafted with all this care to tell a story about what happens to our people when we war one with the other. But we came together once, three metals, iron, bronze, and gold. Dark iron, bronzebeard, wild hammer. We came together to swing our hammers for something greater than shattering bones or filling coffers. Because this council, before Motimus, before Bronzebeard and Wildhammer and Dark Iron, sometime in the ancient past, our people knew no division. All our clans were one, under a queen who had a son with a builder's hands. Thurn rolled his eyes. How can you possibly know all that? Because I can read the runes, Dagrin said simply. The trouble of us, thinking those sigils were all one language. One clan's words, one clan's ideas, one clan's way of being. They are not. They are all three. Each rune is a chimera, a beast formed of the parts of other creatures. Three of them. The long slash of ancient Wildhammer script here. His quick, clever fingers shaped the character's anatomies in the air like curt, blunt points of lost Dark Iron runes there, and bold curves of dead Bronzebeard shorthand uniting them. Each letter follows this pattern. I would have seen that much more quickly if the chimera ended there. Instead, not only is each letter made of three scripts, but each word is formed from pieces of our most ancient languages, and the sentence itself uses a patchwork syntax. Dark Iron verb conjugation, Wild Hammer noun declination, Bronze Hammer prepositions, and syntactic typology. Dagrin was losing them. He'd become distracted by his own joy of study and puzzles, by the light of having solved an impossible riddle and longing to share that, to show it off. My boy had delved far too deep in a mine and had no ore for these. Come back, Dagrin, thought desperately. It is not enough to remember who you are. You must remember who they are. I opened my mouth to write the course of things, to do as I always had done, to guide and corral and make certain my child did not teeter too thoughtlessly on one of a million steep staircases down to a stone floor. But I did not. I opened my mouth and closed it again. I clenched my fingers tight. He could not write to his own course now, with these great men hanging on his words. He never would. No battle wound has pained me as much as sitting still dead. Never one. My child stopped. He closed his eyes, cleared his throat, and began again. And if I am right, they are not just runes. They are a spell of restoration. If I speak the truth, it will show itself. Dagrin Thorzan II ran his fingers across the inscription across his bar. We are all fools, he read. Then he ran his finger around the words that rim the image. But fools no further, fools no further, no further. Over and over again. The blackened, cracked, dried, and peeled blood shimmered and ran like paint, and in a moment, less than a moment, the shield swam with bright dwarven blood, wet and fresh and hot. Will you be fools then? Dagrin said in a voice I did not even know he possessed. He brought his fist down on the shield with such might it cracked beneath his strength. Or will you be brothers? If it is the latter, I welcome you. If it is the former, I have no time for your games when there is so much to build. Stand in my way or do not, he continued. It makes no difference to me. Blood speaks true, and our ancient ancestors, our fathers, our mothers, the actual people who lived and died only to become memories, symbols, the seals on your cups, and the food on your plate. They spent untold fortunes to craft a message that would last beyond eras, only to tell their foolish sons that they are family. Wish to disrespect their honor, leave this hall and let it be your own affair. I will not. I will stay, I will work, I will build. Whoever is strong enough to hold a real hammer. Dagrin tossed the excavation tools on the broken shield and strode out of the room. Follow me and do not look behind you. Fingers. I did, and in that moment truly thought I could not be more proud of the child I brought into the dark world. They will stay, he said behind the door, though I felt more certain in the planning. I I could not imagine you would do so well, I said quietly. I touched his face, my own baby's face, never to be so young again. How did you finally solve the runes? You seemed so lost yesterday. You said it was impossible. Dagran Thorzon II smiled softly at me. This place was full of eyes and ears, and only some of them. I don't understand. It was all so perfect. You found the solution. And there was the boy in him, practically wriggling with excitement to tell me how naughty he'd. I told you the shield is nothing. The shield itself, I mean. I told you the truth. That thing was never made to be used in battle. It could not have been. It is too fine, too dear. And all those soft metals and jewels make it brittle. Ancient dwarves made it not to fight, but to speak. Mother, do you understand? Speak to us. Down through the centuries. They themselves, they knew each other. They knew when their fight was over, so their unity would be. They knew it would all happen again, inevitably again and again. So they made this great object and sent it down the lines of their houses to their great-great-great-grandchildren, a message in a falcon's mouth. And their falcon was time. Dagran laughed dryly, ruefully. I do get carried away, don't I? Then why not make such a letter easy enough to read to anyone? It makes no sense. But it makes every sense. What would you think if you found some bit of scrap metal that said, "You are stupid"? You'd ignore it flat out, and so would everybody else. No, this was the only way to make sure anyone would value it. It was rich enough and strange enough, indecipherable enough, that all the clans would have to come together to argue and fight over it, to claim it for their own. And together, perhaps there might be enough of them that they would have all the pieces needed to comprehend the enormity of what our ancestors were trying to do. They were trying to say, which is the same thing you and Angrid say with your flowers, your music, your food. Remember who you are, because who you are is what we are. That shield and that vase of blossoms are the same gesture above by another hand. No, it had to be a puzzle. Puzzles so good that no one could comprehend it alone. Dagran smiled to himself, and in that moment he looked so much older, so terribly grown. As are we all, I suppose. Oh, I can't imagine how long it took. To plan, to bargain, to spin out gold as fine as thread, hammer out jewels as thin as ice over a winter basin, to devise the gambit. It must have been, Mother, I think it must have been someone like me who did it, who thought it into being and summoned the falcon to fly it into the world he would never know. The light of day is on the other side of his own allotted span, or hers. I narrowed my eyes. I know my son. I do know him. Couldn't help adding your flourish to that lost soul's work, could you? Dagran glanced up at me through the lashes with a shine in his eye. I may have helped a little with the blood spell. Linguistics are quite enough to excite me. I expect my great uncle and his peers would need something more obvious. I wanted to laugh and whisper and take apart every moment of this victory with him, as we used to do when he was small and his only battles were with wooden dwarves and bathtub trolls. Tell him how I had done something not so different in my youth. Show him my pride by showing him how alike we are. But I did not. I could not. I did not want to take from his deed by plastering it with my own, making his virtue mine, leaning over him like a shadow he could not escape to find a light I can learn. I can. Mother, I knew this day would come, and I knew I would not be ready. He went on. I had to be better than them. I had to find my own game. I could never win at theirs any more than you. And it will work now. It will. I know it. For a while at least. It's only ever for a while. Until the need for a falcon comes again. He gripped my shoulders and pressed his forehead against mine. I thought my heart would burst open. Say you're proud. Say I am your son and you see me. You see in me what was taken from you. I see you, my son, I see you. I whispered through my tears. I was wrong about him. We all were. Only they have yet to discover it. He was always my flower, my lilac growing in the most difficult way. But maybe we all are. Flowers beneath the stone. Maybe we all tangle inside. Maybe we scream and charge and stomp and frown because we know if the armor over our true hearts slips even once, this world will eat our petals whole. After all, the lilac is no less of the earthen and earthen than we, no less than the petrified rock on which it must grow. But only Dagran ever stood bare before horrors and told them all he was both at once and would rule them anyway. He is stronger than any of us who live, even me. I was never strong enough to stay soft. As I watch him turn back to a room he would own forever the moment he entered, a room not one single lord had dared to leave, I became my father at last, hard as a diamond, barely able to move for the weight of my own history, watching the future slip in between the cracks before anyone realized it was already. That's the end. That is the end. So I hope everybody enjoyed. I think that one of the ones that have been released. So these short stories are all part of a book that is for sale, and I believe comes out in November. I believe there's 7 short stories. I have read 4 of them to you. So, so far that's my favorite. I like that one. I like the Illyria one. Something about parents and children. I don't know. But anyway, that is all I have for you today. Hour and 40 minutes of reading with a little break in them. Yeah, I appreciate you guys for hanging out. Like I said, this is gonna go on YouTube later. I've already got all the stuff done. I got the thumbnail. It looks a lot like the last thumbnail. So yeah, Shogun, you can go night night now. Story time's over. But yeah, I appreciate you guys for hanging out. I don't know when the next time we'll do a Lorecaster podcast. Like I said, it's in the works. We're trying to think of stuff and how to move forward. But until then, I'll probably just do stuff like this whenever it pops up, and do my regular streams on my scheduled days. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend. I will talk to you guys later. Peace.